Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am very pleased to have as my guest Jayson Downing. And let me tell you a little bit about Jayson. Jayson is a former Marine Corps captain and combat veteran with multiple overseas deployments. He holds multiple graduate degrees with honors and has worked as a college professor and business consultant. His new book, Reawakening the Warrior Spirit, exploring what it means to be a warrior, easy for me to say, in the modern West, engages some of the most challenging topics of the day from the unique perspective of the military warrior mindset. And so we chose today as our theme, the heroic journey. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Jayson Downing.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Vicki. It's great to be here.
You're very welcome. And so we always start with an easy question, and that is, where do you call home? Where do you live?
I'm based out of San Diego, California right now.
I love San Diego.
Have you been?
Love it. Oh, yeah. I worked for UPS and launched the UPS store. And so MBE, which is the parent, changed their name to the UPS store, but they're out of San Diego area. So I spent 2 years every week, except for the weekend every there. So it was a great place to be, great people there.
Yeah, it's a great place. It's hard to leave. I've traveled all over the country and really enjoyed it, but somehow I always end up back here on the West Coast. So
yeah, it's just, except for when those fires come, that wasn't so much fun.
I've been through 2 forest fires since I was born and raised out here. So I remember sitting on the roof of my house growing up, and we were encircled by mountains, and we looked and we could see like a 360-degree view. We could see fire all around us. And we were, preparing to evacuate just, on a moment's notice. So yeah, it can be a little scary.
Yeah, I remember going to church one morning there, and they had the doors open because it was, not cold enough or warm enough for air conditioning. And there were these flakes that came on, like it was snowing in the church, and it was ash.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, should I be concerned? All right, so let's just get into this, the heroic journey. And, in my podcast, I always talk about the journey and how important it is to be present. And I think a lot of times when we think of leadership, and heroes, we tend to think in the military and things like that. But there's just everyday heroes everywhere as we turn and we look.
Absolutely.
But so let's talk about, what is the problem of the modern day Ronin?
So that was a concept that I came across after I got out of military service, and it was one that really rang true for me at the time. So the idea of the Ronin comes from Japanese warrior culture, the samurai culture. Now, samurais are some of the most feared and some of the most respected warriors throughout all of history. They've, even though they only ever represented a very small percentage of the Japanese population, nobody would argue that they fundamentally reshaped that culture. And indeed, their presence are felt worldwide. They were trained as warriors from the age of 5 in swordsmanship and martial arts, in military strategy, and also in warrior virtues, things like strength, power, the service mindset, telling the truth. You don't ever want to accuse a samurai of speaking a falsehood. That was considered a besmirch on their honor. So this is who they are. This is the people that we're talking about. And they were trained from a very young age to serve their master. And what the Ronin was in some unfortunate circumstances, the master of one of these samurai would die. And so without that, the purpose of that samurai's life was now was empty. There was no purpose for that warrior. And so you have some of the most feared warriors in history, some of the best trained, and they're essentially without purpose. The word Ronin in Japanese is written with 2 characters. The word, the symbol for floating and the symbol for man. So a floating man, a person adrift without purpose in their life.
Oh, wow.
And so I was reading about this, and so as a result, from a social level, what happened was that these individuals who were without purpose, they tended to react in one of 2 ways. One of them was disconnection. They would disconnect completely from society. They had no purpose left. The ultimate disconnection, obviously, being suicide. Some would commit suicide because they couldn't bear to live that kind of life anymore. The other was that they would pretty much go kind of to the opposite extreme, and they would essentially join whatever warlord raised the battle flag and said, come join us. We need conscripts, we need warriors. So they would just go and fight for whoever was bringing up trouble at the time, right? As they got into thievery, they got into banditry. And so after I got out of the military service, some of the feelings of this purposelessness, this adriftness, really rang true for me. I didn't anticipate before I got out of the service how exactly I would feel and how big of an impact it would have on me. But, for 5 years of my life, I had a mission statement every single day. I knew what I was doing, and I knew that what I was doing mattered, and that it would affect the lives of people around me and my Marines who were looking up to me. And then just kind of like that, almost overnight, it's all removed, and you have to figure out for yourself, what is the purpose of my life? What is something that's going to get me up in the morning? And what is it that drives me? And that's not an easy question. You would think it would be, but it's not an easy question, especially when you come from a mentality of wanting to serve and wanting to better the lives of others. And so at first came across that story, the Modern Day Ronin, it just applied to me. But then as I started to look around at some of my fellow veterans, and then also as I took on, as you mentioned, I've been a professor, as I took on teaching roles and was teaching, these young 18 to 20-year-olds, I noticed almost the same exact thing happening in the youth, where they have all this potential, all this intellect, this desire to go out and do something, but they just seem lost in a drift and not really sure where they should go. And I attribute that a lot to, as I describe in the book, this collapse or this, going to sleep of the warrior spirit in our culture. And so that's the problem I'm trying to solve essentially in the book, is trying to reinvigorate, reawaken, find again that warrior spirit and what it means to go through life with purpose and dignity and honor.
It's interesting. As you were talking about that, I'm retired, and obviously my retirement doesn't look like most people's, but I found early in my career, a lot of folks that retired, especially those that had been at one company for many, many years, they were without purpose. And a lot of times they didn't last long.
Yeah.
It was failing health and things like that. And I truly believe it's because their life did not have purpose any longer, and they didn't seek to change that. Everybody thought, well, you're retired and you're supposed to just stay home and watch TV or golf or whatever.
Right.
If all your life you had been that manager, that leader, that person, problem solver, and you didn't have anything worse than figuring out what to eat or
Yeah.
it is a struggle for many.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I worked for a very brief period of time. I worked at a golf course, a local golf course, after getting out of the military. I kind of bounced around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And some of the people who worked with me, one in particular, she had worked at um, a correctional facility. So
Mhm.
she was one of the officers that worked there. And I talked to her a little bit because it's kind of hard to get information. She was kind of a quieter person. And she opened up a little bit and said, correctional officers, after you come out of this and retire, don't have a long life expectancy, actually, because of what they have to deal with. And then you're just completely in a different world. It's like kind of like when you go in those prison walls, it's like being at war because you have to
Mhm.
constantly watch your back. It's just a completely different environment, a completely
Yeah.
different social expectation. And when you exit, if you don't have a good plan for what you're going to do with your life afterwards, kind of like you were saying with retirement, it can just work devastating effects on people's mental health.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. Having purpose is really something that we all should strive for. And it's okay for your purpose to change as you evolve and
absolutely.
as you grow.
Right. Right. And that's one of the things that, on a personal level, my son was just born, my first child.
Aw,
And so he's now,
congratulations.
thank you. So he's 3 months old and
Oh my gosh.
yeah, very fresh, very fresh. But to feel the deepening of purpose once you have a kid
Yeah.
is incredible. And it's one of the things that my wife and I have talked about is how do we create even like a multi-generational family going forwards, obviously looking a ways out into the future, for ourselves before we're grandparents, but even in the present, we want, our parents to be as involved as possible
Yeah.
in Jackson's life, because I think that as you transition into the next phase of life, whether that be retirement or whatever, one of the ways people often do find purpose is in the younger generation. And it's kind of one thing that, I've traveled to a lot of different places, a lot of different countries. I've been fortunate. Other cultures seem to understand this a lot better than we do here in
Yeah.
America. And I just think it's one of those unfortunate things that we've lost. So I think that
Yeah.
it's worthwhile to bring back.
For me, I grew up very fortunate that my dad's mom and dad lived just a few blocks away,
Mm-hmm.
and my mom's lived about 10 minutes away and on a farm. And
Mm-hmm.
so I saw them all the time. And
Uh-huh.
I actually went to help clean my grandmother's house with my sister every Saturday. And we had a routine that we went through, and she told us stories and about her life. And as
Mm-hmm.
we were doing the housework and then having a little tea party or whatever after with her, and then with my other grandmother, it was just a total fun because all my cousins would come up, and every Sunday we would have
Mm-hmm.
this family dinner with 30 people. And
Oh,
that was
wow.
what I thought everyone did. And
Yeah.
here now as a grandma, I'm a Oma. I have two grandsons, and while I don't do all the traditions that I did, I do make sure that they understand, how we're connected, and I
Mm-hmm.
just it is my favorite role in life is being their grandmother. And so
From what I hear, it's great because you get
it
all the
is
advantages
awesome.
of parenthood, but without all the responsibility. You just, it's
Yeah. And it's funny, my my daughters, their my husband's mother lived close to us, and we moved from Pittsburgh to Georgia when before they were born. And so my
uh,
parents were in Pittsburgh, and they saw my parents twice a year. And you would have thought that they saw them every day because
mm,
my parents were that kind of opening arms.
hmm.
I miss you kind of everything about it. And my mother-in-law was not that way in terms of she was thinking that she needed to be the disciplinarian and things like that. And so
Mm,
my kids didn't always like to go and visit with her because they were afraid that she was going to, you know, try
right.
to have them do something they didn't want to do. And
Hmm.
I thought it was such a shame. And it wasn't until they got older that she got it, that she
Mm,
realized that,
mm,
it's not my role to be their mom or dad. It's my
Sure.
role to love these kids unconditionally. And
Hmm.
so I make sure my kids, my grandsons, know how much they love me. The best thing in the world is when they see me across the room and yell my name and run
Yeah.
into my arms. And that
Mm.
you cannot buy that happiness. You just
Right.
cannot.
Right. Yeah, I agree completely.
So what do you say that the Western culture, or why do you say the Western culture is experiencing this culture war? What, from your findings, did you discover?
Yeah, so I mean, I started the writing back in 2020, and as we'll all remember, something big was happening in 2020.
Yes.
And we all felt a strain, and it was just seemed like it was coming from everywhere, from the media, from social media, from government, from politics, from workplaces. It was just this strain that, and you had people taking sides, you had a lot of tribalism emerging, and we really felt like this strain, kind of like the country being pulled apart or
Yeah.
culture being pulled apart. And I wanted to know what's going on here. And coming from a background in the military, I looked around and kind of, especially looking at the younger generation, I was confused. It was like a lot of the traditional values, there was just a radical rejection of a lot of traditional values where instead of, instead of stories of heroism and strength, we were hearing lots of tales of victimhood. Instead of focusing on achievement, we were focusing on virtue signaling. Instead of asking questions like, how can I serve others, or how can I be a benefit to others, people are asking with entitlement, what am I owed? And it was just this radical reversal of priorities. And so I wanted to address that and dig into it. And what I ended up finding is that as the warrior spirit has, which I define the warrior spirit as that spirit which enables you and empowers you to confront the opportunities and challenges that you face in life honorably. And so as that's waned in I think the modern generation, we've seen kind of these two polar ideas show up, which have been really destructive. One of them I call toxic individualism, and the other one I call corrupted tribalism. And these are like the two options that I think are presented to especially the younger generation, but increasingly people across the board. One is that you're either an individual, you kind of take that Ronin, the modern day Ronin path of disconnecting from others, disconnecting from social responsibility, disconnecting from anything except your own selfish ambitions and vain pursuits for yourself. So it's not an enlightened self-interest, which we might think of like as of like an Ayn Rand individualism, where it's individualism bounded in a sort of like moral structure that you create for yourself, where you're following something and you're benefiting society while also benefiting yourself. It's this individualism that's completely hedonistic and divorced from any sort of social responsibility. And I'll say that is one of the first things that's beaten out of you when you're in training in the military. You learn that you're no longer an individual. You have responsibility over yourself. That's absolutely true. So it's not that you deny your individuality, but you take that individual responsibility and you expand it such that you realize that you are responsible for so much more than just yourself. You're also responsible for the lives of the men and women that are in your team. So it's this enlightened self-interest, to where if I want to benefit myself in the short term and in the long term, I need to take into consideration not just myself, but also those around me. So that's toxic individualism. The corrupted tribalism piece, I mean, and we see this all over the place. We see it in politics. We see it in social media circles. It's the tendency for people to only associate with those that they agree with, and maybe increasingly people who look like they do, talk like they do, think like they do. And in a lot of the political debates, not the book's not primarily political, but it just seems like everything's been politicized nowadays. It seems like this increasingly focuses around identity groups, to where the presupposition is that the individual is nothing more than a collection of identity groups to which they belong. So you are essentially made into an avatar of whatever groups that you belong to, which seems particularly divisive and just like a bad idea to promulgate amongst especially young people, that we're defined by what groups we belong to at birth instead of the choices we decide to make as we grow older. It's a rejection of Martin Luther King's idea that that we should be judged based on the content of our character rather than the color of our skin, for example. So these are the two groups that I see as kind of taking sides in this culture war and pulling things apart.
And you see that in the gangs that are across the US at least. And it always seemed to me like the lack of community in or family structure causes them to seek this other community that again like-minded and whatnot. But it is always it's lacking, I guess, for the good, or the things that we need to really have a fruitful society.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that I discuss in my chapter. So the book involves a discussion of the 4 primary warrior virtues that I see to have become particularly problematic in our modern culture. It starts off with the idea of service and the servant leader mentality, which is one of the first things you learn in military training. And it goes into the idea of truth. What does it mean to live truthfully and live with honest living? Then it goes into two virtues I discuss at the same time: strength and power. And I see them as interrelated. And then it ends with a discussion of fortitude. And what does it mean to live a life full of fortitude, especially when you're faced with challenging obstacles and opportunities in your lifetime? Because those are going to come. The storms are going to come. It's not if, it's when. So to your point, when talking about the idea of these, gangs or even like, terror groups that have their own sophisticated codes of loyalty and their own systems of honor. That's one of the things I actually discuss in my chapter on service, and trying to piece apart what does it mean to live a life full of honorable service, as opposed to some of these shadowy forms that it can sometimes take when we seek to find belonging in groups that are not oriented up, but are said oriented downwards. And one of the stories I actually tell is a story about one of the New York mobsters back in the 80s, and his own experience in realizing he ended up leaving the mob and establishing a life on his own. And he's one of the few who were able to do that and not be killed. And he said that one of the turning points for him was when he, it's a long story, but essentially his father, who was also part of the mob, sold him out and was willing for his own son to die if it meant that the good of the family, the mob family, would continue on. And so he documents this. He said, when I realized that this, quote unquote family that I was a part of was able to separate father and son, I said, what do we even have at the end of the day if we don't have, the connection between a father and a son? So yeah, I completely agree that this corrupted idea of service that is like kind of found itself into different aspects of our society. It's one that we need to combat. And I think one of the best ways to do that is by having a healthy family structure at home.
Yeah, very true. And in our busy lives, it sometimes is challenging for people. I think one of the things that that the pandemic did bring for some families is that forced family togetherness, and how people allow them, or how people were able to make that work and see the value and the benefit from it, as opposed to, I've had people that were overwhelmed. I'm a mother, I'm a cleaner, I'm a cook, I'm a, teacher, all these things. And they were just so overwhelmed that they couldn't even see the value of, oh my goodness, I have time with my family now, as opposed to I only see them for a few minutes to make dinner and then put them to bed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things, in the West, we live to work and instead of working to live a lot of times. And it's unfortunate that is the mentality. And yeah, I think that for a lot of people that, like you said, the pandemic was a bit of a wake-up call and realizing just where priorities are and where they should be.
Yeah. For individuals and also companies to, how can they structure differently to be able to change that? Because when you change the quality of the individual's life, you change the quality of the work that they bring. And, it makes that person more loyal to the company and will help your bottom line in the long run. But if you work them to the bone and you're not going to get all the things you could out of that person if they even stay.
Right. Yeah. So one of the interesting things that I've been navigating in my own employment right now is that I work remotely. And so the company I work for is actually based out of Atlanta, and I'm here in San Diego. So obviously that's, a huge advantage for me that I'm able to have that. I wasn't forced to relocate. And because I work at home, I'm able to spend time with my 3-month-old. I'm able to, have time with the family. I'm able to, in many cases, kind of set up my schedule how it would be optimized for myself, even though I live on the West Coast, but I work on East Coast time. So that's a bit of a challenge. But so those are all the advantages to working remotely. The major disadvantage is it's just so hard to be a part of a company culture and to establish any sort of culture or collective sense of like this group purpose when you have your employees are scattered literally around the world. We have a couple of employees who work out of Colombia or other countries, and it's nearly impossible. It's just not the same communicating over Zoom or over Skype as it is showing up to the workplace every day and having that collective sense of purpose. And so it's a particularly interesting leadership challenge, I would say, too, trying to maintain a sense of cohesion when people are scattered all over the world in some cases.
Yeah, I often have discussions about that very topic. I think that one of the areas that often are cut in budget is training, and we really can't expect a person to go from operational or transactional kind of job to a leadership job and know how to do it well in this environment where you really have to you have to put out a lot of effort to create those atmospheres of the water cooler or the meeting in the lunchroom and things like that, where you're just building relationships. You're not really every conversation is not necessarily about what your project is or what your duty is. It's just to get to know that person, to get to know about your 3-month-old and life as a new dad and things like that. That's important for you to be able to establish. And that takes work, and not all the managers, male or female, are ready or equipped to do that because their examples maybe never taught them that, or they're not in everyone is all remote, and they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, well, and a couple thoughts there as you were talking. One is that there's a difference between a manager and a leader, right?
Oh, yes.
I would say a manager oversees and inspects, whereas a leader inspires. And the leader is the visionary, the manager is the person who, I don't know, can correct and can hold the system in place, but oftentimes isn't the one who's generating new systems or generating the vision for moving forward. And a successful company will have both leaders and managers, or will have somebody who can lead and manage. But a lot of times you're just left with, the dreaded middle managers who do nothing except set meetings and like to hear themselves talk, as opposed to actually creating a positive movement forward and inspiring their subordinates. So, and I would say that problem is just exacerbated with the online and the remote working, which, and again, I'm one of the people who takes advantage of remote work. So I there's a part of me that really loves it, but there's no getting around the fact that it's just a particularly difficult leadership challenge.
Yeah, but it's one we have to figure out.
It is.
I don't think we're going to go back to the way it was.
No, I mean, things have been changed forever. And I do think that one of the things that as technology continues to evolve so rapidly, I think that we're going to continue to see new ways to interface with each other, and better and better ways, such that maybe it will be more managers will be more empowered to be able to become leaders, and that there'll be more of a sense of community, even despite the distance. So, that's the hope. I think that's one of the good things that we can say has come about from technology. And so, I'm looking forward to that. But I would also say there's just also no substitute to, like you said, like going out on the golf course with somebody, or, going and sharing a beer with somebody. It's hard to replace that sometimes.
Yeah. I was on a project as a contractor, and they most of the people were all around, but a lot of them were based in Jersey. And so I kept on waiting for them to say, we'll fly you up. They would have group dinners or group outings for the people that were local. But they never said, hey, we'll fly you up so that you can be part of that, just once or twice. I never met my direct manager in the year and a half that I was on that project.
That's rough.
And
now, that is one thing I'll say.
Not the way it should be.
No. I will say that this company I work for right now, they've flown me out to Atlanta twice now. So at least once or twice a year, try to make it out there and just be able to, work even in the office with everybody, just so that we kind of we know at least what each other looks like. And
yeah,
we
I know.
can,
Other than in Zoom. Oh, wait, you're that tall? Oh.
That is one of the weird things when you meet somebody and they're standing up and you're standing up and you're like, oh, you're that? Okay. Yeah. Everybody looks the same size on Zoom.
I know, we do. Well, time has flown by. It's been really wonderful chatting with you about the heroic journey. And, there are challenges that we have, but I think if more people like you are bringing it to light, maybe we can find that change that's necessary. So it's going to be time now for me to share my screen. It is, for those that are just listening, your reminder that you should get a paper and pencil to write down the website information, but everything is available on my YouTube channel, and as well as my findyourleadershipconfidence.com. So the website is thewarriorjournal.com, and he can be found on Instagram, Jayson M. Downing. That's Jayson, M like Mary, Downing. You can see, those that are watching, the picture of his book, Reawakening the Warrior Spirit, so that you can go ahead and quickly identify that as you go to purchase it, hopefully. But I'll let Jayson talk to you more about what you can find on the website and how you can purchase his book.
So the book is available for purchase primarily on Amazon. So just go to Amazon, type in Reawakening the Warrior Spirit. It's the first one that comes up. On my website, I have several blog articles. I have a little bit about myself on there. I have a link to where you can buy the book. I also have an opportunity for you to sign up for a newsletter. And when you do, it'll also email you a free warrior morning routine that I've put together for myself and for a few of the people that I know. And it's just a way to get your morning started off right.
Awesome.
And actually, little hint, in order to have a good morning, it starts the night before. So put down your cell phone, turn off the TV, and do that a couple hours before you go to bed in order to get yourself some proper sleep, and then wake up and really be able to have a great morning so you can seize the day.
Awesome. Well, Jayson, I have enjoyed very much having a conversation with you. You have a great background, and I definitely want to check out your book. I think that it should be a great read. And as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling, signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.